Welcome back to Western Civ. We're picking up here with the 14th century, the terrible, glorious 14th century. It's the 1300s, and I'm going to break it into three parts: the good, the bad, and the ugly. Just try to help you see what's going on here. All this stuff's happening at the same time, basically. So looking at the 1300s, the 14th century. Well, why this date? Why is this a good century here to start with? Well, it's the end of the Crusades. The 1300s, the Crusades are over. They've been going on for 200 years, since the 1100s, and now they're done. No more crusading down toward the Holy Lands. And this also marks the start of the Renaissance. We're trying to find out when the Renaissance starts. Some historians started about 1300. You probably know it about 1500 with the great art of Michelangelo and Da Vinci and Raphael. But it starts in the 1300s. When you start seeing this rebirth. That's what the Renaissance is. It's a rebirth of Greek and Roman ideals. And you see it most clearly in the art. You'll see it, the great Greek statues and great Roman statues. Now you'll start to see Europeans want to return to that. And then the third marker is the start of a Reformation. The Reformation starts from here. The idea of reforming the Catholic Church. There's problems in the church. They need to be reformed. So we'll get to that to finish up this century. Well, let's look at the Crusades. The end of the Crusades are at 1300. Going back a little bit in time, they were called around 1095, called a crusade by the Pope. The Pope calls a crusade, and people drop what they're doing. You will see soldiers, the most famous of the soldiers, going down, but you'll have common people going down also. And even there's a children's crusade. So this really shows the power of the Pope when he calls this and people answer. And it's a great success. 1096, the masses of Europeans will march down to the Holy Lands through the Balkans, down through Constantinople, on their way down to Jerusalem, and they capture it. Europe was in kind of a dark age, but they fought really well, these dark age knights, and they capture the city of Jerusalem. And then they will set up Crusader States. They will actually break the area into states and begin to run it in a feudal system. The way Europe was run, they'll run these states the same way. And they're there for about 200 years. Now, you might not think about the Crusades, but this leaves a mark in the Middle East. People who live there today, and the Muslims who live there today, remember these 200 years when they were held under Christian rule. And then finally, the Muslims will rise up and be able to drive these Christians back out. And by 1291, the last Crusader fortress falls down there, the fortress of Acre. So let's just round up and call it 1300. That's why I picked 1300, is that the Crusades are over. The last of the Crusaders are driven out. Well, contrary to popular opinion, it's not, the war doesn't exist between Christians and Muslims here. In fact, Christians will be welcome, just not Crusaders. But Christian pilgrims can come down there all they want. You'll need to bring money with you. The Muslims will want money, a fee, to visit these Christian sites. But there is interaction between the Christians and the Muslims. Here's a map of the Crusades, at least the first crusade, starting in the French and German areas and then marching through the Balkans, through Constantinople, all the way down to Jerusalem. Later on, the later Crusades, they'll come down through Italy and then catch a boat over here. The Crusader States, what do they set up there? Well, after capturing Jerusalem here, they'll set up a king. They'll actually have a series of kings in Jerusalem, and then they'll have counts in Tripoli, the county of Tripoli, a principality of Antioch. So these states are set up in a feudal system for 200 years. They also learn about fortress building. Europe at this time was not leading the way with fortress building, but these Crusaders will get on that. They need fortresses to hold these positions, and you'll start seeing these massive fortresses being built, and they'll take this back with them. Some of the Crusaders will go back home to Europe, and you'll start seeing this is the age of great castle building in Europe, what they learned down in the Middle East. Well, once it's over, the goodness of this, the good thing about the Crusades, besides the warfare, is that trade will continue to flow. Even at the end of the Crusades, there's trade. And to and from Europe, this opens up Europe, and you'll start to see interaction with the Middle East, the Holy Lands. Now, the big beneficiary of this is Italy. The Crusader Knights come down through Italy, trade comes back up through Italy. Italy really makes a profit on this. Everybody going down, everybody coming back, goods going in, goods going out. Italy really benefits. And you will start to see the rise of some great independent cities. I just listed a few of them here, but Italy will be full of these great trading cities making a lot of money off this interaction. I just listed the city of Genoa, Pisa, Venice. These are coastal cities, but you'll also have interior cities making a lot of money. Lots of Italian cities making lots of money off these crusades and afterwards. Now, if you bring goods into Italy, or if you want goods going out of Italy, you're going to have to cross the Alps. And who controls the Alps? Well, the Swiss do. And the Swiss control the passes. You don't go over the mountains, you go between the mountains, and the Swiss will control those passes, and they'll make money. So this trade helps the Swiss. And then from the Rhine River, if you continue from Italy north across the Alps and then on to the Rhine, well, the Rhine flows north and empties out through the Netherlands, the Dutch, the Low Countries there. But if you drop off the Rhine to the left-hand side, you'll be dropping into the French side, and the French will benefit. They will have the age of the great Champagne fairs. The area, Alsace and Lorraine area, it's also called Champagne, and there's some great fairs there. So like great trading center for the French. And then on the German side of the river, you'll have what's called the Hanseatic League, a bunch of German cities that are getting into trade and kind of cooperating with each other for trade. These are on the German side, these great wealthy Hanseatic cities, all the way up into the Baltic area. So looking at Italy, the beneficiary of all this trade, if you'll notice a map of Italy here, it's multicolored. Italy is not united. They're making a lot of money here in the 1300s and 1400s and 1500s, but they're not united. Italy won't become a country, a boot-shaped country, until around the time of our Civil War. So we got a long way to go for Italy to unite, but you've got these wealthy little states, and here's a map of northern Italy. Northern Italy is the one that's really rich. But look at all the little tiny states there, just little tiny states, and they compete with each other. They tend to wage war with each other. They tend to embargo each other or trade wars with each other. So Italy really is benefiting here. Here's the medieval trade routes coming through the Black Sea, through Constantinople, or even across up through the Red Sea even, and then coming into Europe, and then from Italy crossing the Alps into northern Europe. So there's a great dynamic age of trade in Europe. Well, let's talk about these traders. Who are these people moving goods around? This is a completely new thing. Okay, it's not completely new. There have been people moving goods around for a long time, but this is like a whole new class, a whole group of people doing this, because there's massive amounts of trade going on. So this new class of people, these traders, they need money. They buy things over here, and they sell things over here. So a new class of people. They're outside the feudal system. The feudal system, Europe in the Dark Ages, had a man who controlled a piece of territory, and then you would swear oaths to him. The feudal system is about oaths, not about money. So these people are outside the feudal system. They're not swearing oaths to anybody. They don't live off the land. They don't live in a castle. They're not the nobles. They're not the serfs. They're in between. They're a middle class. This is the birth of the middle class as a powerful group of people. And where would they live? Well, you can't live on the castle or on the farm there, so they will have to live together in these fortified areas. They will join together and build a wall or some kind of fortress around themselves. If you are in German areas, the German states, they call these things Bergs, a fortified area called a Berg. The French will call them a Burg, and the English will eventually have to use the word borough for this. This is where these words come from. Where would they be? Well, you need to be able to move goods around, so you're going to be on a crossroads or preferably on a river. You know, rivers and boats can move massive amounts of goods. So these are the traders. 1300s is a whole new time for Europe, a dynamic age. These people who live in Bergs or Burgs are called burghers, if you're German, or bourgeoisie, if you're French. This is where this word comes from, this burghers and bourgeoisie, these middle-class people. Well, how many people are doing it? It's a small amount. This is not a great age for huge cities or these burgs and bourges. Maybe 10% of the population, that's at the upper end 10%. So looking at, let's say, a group of 10 medieval people, you would have about maybe 8 peasants, 1 noble, and possibly 1 person who's doing trading. This new class of people, maybe 10% of the population. How big is a city? How big are these places where middle class are starting to live? Maybe 10,000. That would be a pretty good sized place. That would put you on the map at 10,000. The largest of them in Europe, maybe 100,000. So you do have some areas where people are really starting to mass. That would be like Paris or London with 100,000 people in them. And again, this is the medieval times. The massing 100,000 people together, you're going to have a lot of garbage and refuse and great danger of fire. These people are living really close together. So let's continue with this dynamic age. You've got a lot of trade going on, people making money. Well, this is also the age of universities. When people have a lot of money, well, sometimes they want better for their kids, and they pay money to send them to an educated person. This is where universities come from, putting a bunch of professors together. Why would you go? Well, you want a job. This is where you'll get your training for government. Kings and princes will hire these college graduates as for lawyers to work their law system. Also engineering. This will be a great age of engineering, which we'll come to in a second. A lot of building going on. And then accounting. This is an age of money. Money has reappeared now, and you need people to keep track of your taxation and expenditures. Well, the first university pops up in Italy, where you'd expect it to be, where there's a lot of rich Italians. It's in the city of Bologna. The first university that reaches Europe is at Bologna. And then they will spread north from there. Paris will have a university, the Sorbonne, and then up to England. And you'll have kind of rival universities. Oxford will let you know that they came first, but Oxford and Cambridge will pop up in England. Well, at the universities, what goes on there? Well, everything's done in Latin. This is the Middle Ages, and Latin is the language of the educated people. So one of the things you're learning about, something new that's happening here at the universities, is there's now a law code. Europe had been working on a medieval system of feudalism. Now there's a law code, and it kind of reappears in Europe. It's Justinian's law code. Justinian was a Roman emperor. He had done this law code back in the 500s. Rome had fallen in the 400s. Justinian was over in Constantinople, which stayed up for another, actually at this point it's still up. What is it? It's a condensation. Rome had been 500 years of a republic, 500 years of an empire, and you had lots and lots of laws. So this is a condensation, back to a useful form of laws. 1,000 years of Roman laws condensed down to a useful form, and it makes its way back to Europe. Constantinople had this, the Middle East had this, and now it makes its way to Europe, and they recognize here's a useful law code, and this will be the basis of a new law system in Europe, not just based on brutality or history, but on a Roman legal system. Again, this is part of the Renaissance, a rebirth of Roman ideas. This is the Renaissance. All of this is the Renaissance. You see it in the art, but there's so much more going on. Educated people, it's all about the Greeks and the Romans, this rebirth of knowledge, Europe coming, kicking and screaming out of the Dark Ages as all this new Roman and Greek writing comes to light at the universities, being brought out of the monasteries or being brought back from the Middle East. It turns out that, against popular myth, that the Arabs were somehow opposed to Roman ideas. No, that's not true at all. They actually preserved the Greek and Roman things and actually improved upon them. They actually read this stuff and used it and improved it. The Arabs would be leading the way in physics at this age and astronomy, the idea of star watching and seeing what's out in the heavens. Medicine, they are the ones who actually cut open a cadaver to see how the body works. That will improve medicine. Christians were not allowed to do that. And then mathematics, you know that they lead the way in mathematics. Some of the things they come up with. They come up with the concept of zero. They come up with using solving for X, algebra, basically anything, algorithms, anything that starts with an al pretty much is an Arab creation. So they're leading the way in all these things at the time of the Crusades. In the universities, as a student there, you're definitely going to be studying philosophy. One of your classes will be philosophy. And there you will run into Aristotle. Now, he's been around for a long time. This is 300s BC. His writings, again, come to light. He is the master of all fields. All things he wrote about during the Greek ages. Master of all things. So anything that you think about, you want to find what Aristotle has to say, and that will pretty much solve that answer. And then we also bring up Plato again. If you remember Plato from the ancient times, he talked about metaphysics, things that don't exist in this physical world, things that exist inside your mind or unseen things. And he talked about universal ideas, the reason that we all can recognize beauty and we all can recognize courage and we all recognize justice is because these things exist inside of our mind, inside of a perfect world. We see them in a bastardized form, an incorrect form here in this physical world, but in a metaphysical world they exist. So you'll be getting into that stuff again. And then theology. Obviously, this is a very religious age. You're going to study the Bible. And what's going to happen now is if you're studying Aristotle and Plato, these are pagans, and you're studying Romans, those are mostly pagans. These pagan ideas are going to come in conflict with Christianity. Christian ideas are doctrine. And this is nothing new. I'm sure you've experienced that if you're a Christian. And, well, it's a debate. It's a problem. Solved in the 1200s. A man named Thomas Aquinas solved this problem of the physical world versus what the Bible says. And here's what he said. He said this very simply, that there are actually two sources of knowledge, two major sources of knowledge, things that come to us. Well, one of them is inside your brain. You have the ability to reason. You see things and can reason inside your brain. And then the other is religious revelation. The Bible is revelation. If you're trying to compare it to this physical world, it doesn't match up because they're two different things. The Bible is talking about something else spiritually. It's not talking about this physical world. These two things don't. They do contradict because they're not the same thing. All right, so that's universities. Let's talk about some great building that's going on. Europe is building some great things. This is the age of the Gothic Cathedrals. They've had cathedrals before, big churches, but this is a new type of building, Gothic cathedrals, with all this new math at the universities, all these new engineers coming out. They can build bigger buildings. And again, you'll want a big building at this time. If you're a Christian, they have a preoccupation. This is the Middle Ages. Coming out of the Dark Ages, they still have a preoccupation with God. This is very important to you. You could die at any moment, and so you need to prepare your salvation. And this is a way of doing it, building a big church to show God your devotion. And again, lots of money. There's now lots of money in these cities where they're going to be building these giant Gothic cathedrals. And what you'll see in these Gothic cathedrals and these new things is you'll see pointed arches. These are arches that come to a point. Here you can see one right there. These pointed arches. And then outside the building, you'll see flying buttresses to hold these giant walls up, or not. They're not giant walls, they're tall walls. They'll be buttressed from the outside, and this will allow the inside to be more open. And you'll get higher walls, taller than anything existing. Not as tall as the pyramids, obviously, but getting pretty tall with these thinner walls. Not giant 15-foot wide walls, but smaller walls, maybe 8 or 10 foot wide walls to hold up these giant buildings. And then with these thinner walls, you can have lots of windows. And the way of making glass, you don't have big panes of glass. You've got little pieces of glass, and you can actually put them in a picture. So you'll have pictures on the sides of the walls with these stained glass windows, and they're quite beautiful and still exist. So here's a picture of Notre Dame in Paris, with the flying buttresses holding up the backside of it. Most people see the front side of Notre Dame with just the two towers. This is the backside showing the flying buttresses holding everything up. And what you get is the inside more open, this dazzling inside of the cathedral. And then lots and lots of pretty stained glass. Just makes a dazzling thing, these cathedrals. You will be in awe when you go into them. We have them in America. We have imitations of these Gothic cathedrals, but these are starting at the 1300s. This is 700 years ago, these massive cathedrals. They would have been quite awe-inspiring. So these cathedrals, well, why are we talking about this? Well, what you see here is a lot of competition. Europeans getting really competitive now with their building projects. They dump lots of money into these things. Wealthy middle class and nobility putting money into these projects. And something that you wouldn't see completed in your lifetime. It will take generations to finish these. Your generation could do the planning and maybe lay the foundation. The next generation could maybe put the walls up, and the next generation could maybe at some point put the roof on the thing. So it's just amazing. Generation after generation, the money going into these things. And again, if you're an engineer, you're going to be making some money. You're going to be in demand, as every city wants a cathedral, bigger and better cathedrals. And if you're a skilled laborer, you're going to be in demand also. All this stonework here and woodwork, these building projects. Here's some stained glass pictures. They will actually put themselves in the pictures. Here's an engineer, stained glass of an engineer, and here's laborers hauling blocks and carving stones. So even in the pictures themselves, they put themselves. Here's a big one of the massive cathedrals in Europe, still standing, the cathedral at Chartres in France. This is west of Paris. This giant cathedral sits on top of a hill, so you can see it from miles around. Massive walls, massive roof. And then if you notice the towers, the two towers on the front, they seem to be odd. And the reason for this is that one tower was built and the other tower was supposed to match it. But then they found out that a cathedral in, I think, Cologne, Germany was going up higher than this. And so they end up pumping this tower even higher to try to match the Germans. So a lot of competition in these things. And again, also a reminder that you're seeing the ones that were just built wonderfully. Lots of them fell down. Some cities don't have cathedrals because they fell down at some point. So that was the good. Now for the bad.